Jesus' name. I have 3 stories for you this evening. This is not one of the stories here. We're going to get to the stories. I think stories are important. I think God made us to enjoy stories. If you think about the preaching that Jesus did while he was on earth, at least what is recorded for us, and we only have a portion of the words of Jesus. It says that if everything had been written down that Jesus said or did, it would be too much for you. But of what we have of what Jesus spoke, it's mostly stories. He would tell a story, and then he would make a spiritual application to it. Tonight I have a story to start off for the children. This, by the way, is our family. Little introduction there. Of course, myself and my wife, Kathy. This is our oldest son. He's not married. He runs a roll forming business and a shed company in Virginia. And they also have one in Colorado. That's our son, Rich. This is our son, Hans. He rescued a Troyer from being a Troyer and turned her into a Lauer. And we're glad of that. This is our third son, Joe. He rescued a Schwarzentrooper and turned her into a Lauer. They have 2 children, and then the other 4 are children from the community. We invited them to church about 5 years ago, and they've been coming ever since. So they spend about 2 days a week with us, and we enjoy having them. Helps us not to be empty nesters. Here's the first story. So you children, once you think about a birdhouse, that there is a birdhouse. How many of you children have birdhouses at your place, at home? Anybody? A couple of you. We like birdhouses. We have some birdhouses around our place. We like birdhouses because we like birds. It's nice to have birds, to go out on your deck or on your porch and to hear birds, to see birds out in the yard. This is a birdhouse that I bought at our school auction some years ago. One of the boys in school built that birdhouse, and when I was looking at the things at the school auction the night before, I was very impressed with his birdhouse. He did not just take a couple of boards and slap them together. You can see that he did a very good job. He used his imagination. He actually made it look like a little house. I appreciate his attention to detail. He has a little chimney on the house. It doesn't work. There's not like a wood stove inside, but it's just for looks. There's a chimney, and there's windows and a door, and he trimmed them out. He put a little fence on the front of the porch. Up here on the roof is actually where the bird goes in. He put the hole up there. He has a little nail out here. It's real convenient for the bird to hop on it. He even thought ahead that year to year you need to clean your birdhouse out. And on the back of the birdhouse, there's a board here, and you can just make out a little latch. I can open that latch and pull the board out and clean out the old nest, shut it up, and a bird can come the next year and make another nest. So he did a really good job on that birdhouse, and I bought it at the auction. Took it here. This is at the house where we live now, our Dottie house, and I thought, well, where am I going to put this birdhouse? I don't really like to weed eat. There are probably some people who like to weed eat, but I don't like to weed eat. And I've got lots of weed eating already to do. So I decided I'm going to put this birdhouse up against the woods. Got like a little hill or a little mountain behind our house. And it's going to go back there so I don't have to weed eat around it. I did put it up on a little pole so that coons couldn't come along or a possum. I'm not just going to set a birdhouse on the ground. That doesn't make much sense, but on purpose I put it up on a post, and on purpose I put it up against the woods so that I would not have to weed eat around it. When you think about a birdhouse, you think about several things. I think about just the expression on purpose. That boy on purpose built a birdhouse for the school sale. And on purpose, he did a very nice job. I bought that birdhouse on purpose because I wanted it. I put it up against the woods on purpose because I didn't want to have to weed eat around it. And birds use birdhouses on purpose. Do you ever think about that? They have a reason why they want that birdhouse. A birdhouse also represents safety. Now, God made birds to have their little birds out in the open, but somehow we think that they need more protection than that. We need to build little houses for them to raise their little birds so they can be safe. And then I also think about, well, what are birdhouses for? Why do you have birdhouses? You have birdhouses so you can have little birds around. A birdhouse kind of represents home or family. There was one thing I didn't think about when I put my birdhouse where I did. I was over mowing one day, and I took a pass around the outside of the yard, and I drove past the birdhouse. I don't have to weed eat it because it's sitting up on the bank in the woods, and I just happened to look out, and I about fell off the mower because there was an enormous black snake. And I saw in a second what he was doing. Snakes must be smart. He had gone up the hill, that's kind of a steep hill up there, and he had climbed up in a tree. And then he had climbed out on branches. And I had stopped the mower and I was watching this. And when I first saw him, he was just a little further back. He would go out on a branch as far as he could go, and the branch would start to sag down when he got to the end of it. And he did a little flip. And he flipped off the branch and landed on another branch below it. And then he went out that branch as far as he could. And then after I took this picture, he flipped onto another branch. And he was coming right at my birdhouse. You know what I did? I got mad. Because I thought, those are my little birds. And you are not going to eat my little birds. So I got off my mower, and we had a meeting with Mr. Snake. And we came to an agreement that he was never going to eat any little birds forever. Never again was he going to eat a little bird. So there is a lesson in this, and this lesson applies to those of you who are a little older than the children. Why someday do you want to have a home? Like, why would you want to get married? Why would you want to have a place of your own? Why would you want to have children? Well, you would. And when you do that, you do it with intentionality. You just don't pick names out of the hat and decide which girl you're going to go after. You pick one. And then she either picks you or she tells you to go on down the road. But it's with purpose. It's with intentionality that these things happen. You have children because you want to have children. You pick the house you pick on purpose. The way you furnish your house is on purpose. Kind of the way you live your life should be on purpose. But do you actually create safety? That's that other element about birdhouses. On purpose, I stuck this birdhouse up against the woods, not out in the open, up against the woods, for the sake of convenience. For the sake of personal convenience, I didn't want to be weed eating around that thing every week. So I'm going to stick it up against the woods. And I stuck it right underneath these trees with all these branches. I didn't think about it that a snake would use the branches to get into the house. I didn't think about it. And that's kind of what the dilemma that we face in life. Sometimes we allow things in our lives for convenience. This is just awful convenient to do this, or to have this. And without thinking about it, we allow a path for the serpent. There is a serpent out there. He's called the old serpent. And we allow, for our own convenience, a path for the serpent to come eat our little birds. And I don't think you want the serpent to eat your little birds. We're going to talk about two individuals this evening. We are next? The first individual I do not know her name. Her name is gone and lost. All I know is that she was Erica's mother. And the second individual is named Stella Goldslag. They had a lot in common, and they had a lot that was not in common. Talk to you about Erica's mother first. It was late in 1944. It was either like December of 1944, or it might have been January of 1945. The story takes place in Germany. That, of course, is during World War II. It was near the end of World War II, and by late 1944, early 1945, Germany is losing. The war has not gone well. Sort of a cloud of defeat is hanging over Germany. When they look to the east, the Russians are pounding their way, forcing the German armies back and back and back. They're resisting the best they can, but there's just too many Russians, and they have too much American equipment, and the German armies are being ground down and pushed back. If they look to the west, the Allies, the British and the Americans, have landed in Normandy, and they've pretty much taken back France, and they've crossed into Germany. So it's kind of like Germany is in a vice, and the Russians are coming this way, and the Americans and the British are coming this way, and Germany is getting squeezed in the middle. In the midst of that, the German government was still functioning, and it was doing, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, the best it could to eliminate the remaining Jews that lived in Germany. Many had been killed already, but even with the Russians pushing on them from the east and the Americans from the west, significant resources were still being devoted to hunt down the few remaining Jews in German-held territory. It was on an unmarked day that winter, probably either in December or in January, but it's not exactly remembered where it was. But in the middle of that winter of 1944-1945, a train approached a little village in rural southern Germany. It was not a big town, it was a village. And as the train approached the village, of course it had to slow down to go through the village. There was an engine, and then it was pulling a number of cattle cars. There was a passerby that day who stopped and watched the train. The train was not carrying cattle. The train was carrying Jews to a concentration camp that was nearby, an extermination camp. The train was full of people who would be dead within a few hours. They'd be unloaded from the train, or at least most of them would be dead. A few of the healthiest ones would be selected to work for a period of time, and the rest went straight to gas chambers to be gassed, and then crematories to have their bodies burned. The cattle cars were full of Jewish people. They were boarded up, and as this man watched, he noticed something happening at the top of a cattle car. There was like a ventilation, like a place where the boards were left out for ventilation of the cattle car, and that had been wired over with barbed wire to keep anyone from crawling out. And he saw a pair of hands up at the top of the train car, and they were pushing the barbed wire strands apart. And after a little bit of a hole had been made, the hands disappeared for a moment, and then they reappeared with a little bundle wrapped in a blanket. And they held that little bundle outside the barbed wire just for a second, and then those hands threw the bundle off the train. The train rumbled on, cleared the village, picked up speed, and went on toward the concentration camp. In curiosity, the man wanted to see what was in that bundle that was thrown from the train. So he went to retrieve it, and it was a baby. It was a baby girl wrapped up in a blanket. He knew it was a Jewish baby, and you would get in a lot of trouble if you helped the Jewish baby. But he risked it, and he picked it up and took it. He wasn't brave enough to keep it himself, but he knew a lady that he thought would keep that baby. So he took that baby to his lady friend, offered it to her, and she said, yeah, she would keep that baby. She kept that baby and named that baby Erica. Erica grew up. She survived the war. She lived to an old age. Her story is only known because just a few years ago, an American tourist, a writer by chance, was visiting in Germany and sat down on a park bench next to an old lady and was visiting with her, and the old lady was Erica. She told the lady her story. Erica had been rescued by a German woman. She was a Jewish baby. But there were lots of things Erica didn't know. Erica didn't know what her real name was. There was no tag attached to the baby that said her name is such and such. Erica is the name the German woman gave her. She didn't know what her real name was. She didn't know when she was born. She could guess from what the lady told her when she was found and about how old she appeared to be, that she was probably born in 1944 sometime, but she had no idea what her birth date was. She had no idea where she was from. Was she from Germany or France or the Netherlands? She didn't know what her mother's name was or her father's name. She didn't know if she was the first child of a young mother, or if she was maybe down at the bottom of a long line of siblings. She didn't know anything about her background or about her heritage. All she knew is she was Jewish. And she said later that the only thing she knew about her mother was that her mother must have loved her very much. Consider the situation the mother was in, that woman who threw the baby off the train. By that point in her life, she very likely knew that she would be dead in a short period of time. She had already probably lost most of her family. She would have lost her home and all of her earthly possessions. Riding on that train, likely, the only thing she had left in the world was that baby girl. And in that desperate circumstances, she threw away the only thing she had left. She took a great risk in doing this. She couldn't see where she was even throwing the baby. What if she threw the baby and it landed in a ditch full of water and the baby drowned? What if the baby landed on stones or on concrete and was hurt or killed? What if it was found and turned in and it would just be killed? But she was in desperate circumstances, so she took a great risk and she threw the baby. The way that Erica said it later is that on her way to death, she threw me to life. She gave up the last thing she had in life and threw it away for the sake of the baby, in the hope that maybe the baby would survive the fall, maybe some kind-hearted person would find it. It wouldn't lay there and freeze to death alongside the track. Maybe the baby would live. How do you imagine that woman felt after she threw the baby? She couldn't see where it landed. She could just barely reach the hole to throw it out. Do you think it was probably a pretty lonely feeling to sink down in that cattle car and you've thrown away the last thing that you had? That's Erica's story. Tell you another story and this story is about somebody named Stella. I actually know quite a bit about Stella. Stella was a few years older than Erica. Stella was a Jewish girl in Germany during World War II. Stella's name was Stella Goldslag. She knew her birthday. Her birthday was July the 10th, 1922. Stella knew her family. She was an only child of fairly prosperous middle-class family that lived in a suburb just outside Berlin, Germany. Stella enjoyed a very comfortable life. Her family was upper middle class, and she was the only child. She was spoiled from childhood. She attended very good schools, and when she got out of school, she went to like what we would call junior college or maybe like a tech school. She was training to be a fashion designer. So she had kind of a career path in mind. Stella had another advantage in a worldly sense. Standards of beauty change over time, but in her day, in the 1940s, she was considered extraordinarily good looking. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. She was slender and thin, very attractive. Stella didn't look a bit Jewish. She was Jewish. She was 100% Jewish, mother and father's side both. But she looked like she was German. Blue-eyed, blonde-haired, good-looking. Stella survived all the early years of the war. Her family got rounded up, but she was able to blend into German society. Her luck only ran out on her 21st birthday, 1943. She was caught in a roundup of Jews, taken to a police station, and beaten within an inch of her life. Just brutally beaten. And thrown into a cell, and the next morning they came in and they gave her a choice. You have two options, and you have only two options. And you will immediately choose one or the other. The first option is that we are putting you on a train to a concentration camp and you will be dead within 1 week. Your second option is that you are going to become a greifer. A greifer is a catcher. They knew, the Gestapo, the German secret police, that the best way to catch a Jew was with another Jew. Some years ago, in a church where I was at that time, some of the boys went off for a weekend. And they went off to a big city. They had kind of a schedule of things they wanted to do while they were in that city, visiting. It was not a city where there were any Mennonites at all, at least not that you would look at and consider a Mennonite, but they were sightseeing in this large city. And walking down the street one afternoon, and a man stopped them. And he said, "Y'all are Mennonites, aren't you?" I don't think he didn't say y'all. He said, "You are Mennonites." And they really wondered at that. Well, how did he know we were Mennonites? Wasn't no girls along. It was boys. They were dressed, you would say, in Saturday clothes. The man would not tell them how he knew they were Mennonite. But they figured they knew how he knew. He was probably an ex-Mennonite. And he had been following down the street and listening to them talk, and it was the way they said words, or an accent in their voice, or their mannerisms, or something that he's like, those are Mennonites. Takes one to know one. How many of you can pick out an ex-Amish boy? Okay? Takes one to know one. That's what was offered to Stella. You're a Jew. You look like a German, but you're a Jew. By this time, most of the Jews in Germany had been caught, and the ones that were yet free, they were in hiding, posing as Germans, disguised as Germans, hiding with Gentile friends. But you know how they talk. You know the little mannerisms. And you're either going to die within a week, or you're going to become a greifer for us, and you're going to go catch them for us. Stella chose to be a greifer. She was the best greifer the Germans ever had. In her career between 1943 and 1945, she sent, the figures are not exact, she sent between 600 and 3,000 Jews to concentration camps. Stella had a particular way that she went about her work. She was given a salary, a supervisor, and day by day she would dress up as nicely as she could, and she would go to town, city to city. And she would sit in cafes and watch people come in and out, and she would go to stores and pretend she was shopping. And the whole time she's looking for something. She's looking for somebody that she thinks is a Jew, and they're hiding, pretending to be a German. She was very good at picking them out. And she particularly focused on Jewish men. And when she saw a fellow that she decided was actually a Jew, this is how Stella would do. Stella would come up alongside him and engage him in small talk. And then, once she made his acquaintance, she would kind of grow scared and desperate and get a kind of like a wild look in her eyes. And she would say, "I have a terrible secret." She said, "I'm a Jew and I'm hiding and I'm alone and I'm scared and I need help. Would you hide me? Could I come live with you?" And it almost always worked. She was almost never wrong. If she thought you were a Jewish man, she pretty much had you pegged. And when Stella looked at you and said, "Can I come live with you?" Stella was awful good looking. And she would move in and become a live-in girlfriend. And she would live with that man. And then she would pump him for information. You know of any other Jews that are hiding? Got any relatives left alive? Where do you get your counterfeit identity documents? They're so good. Wish I had a set like that. And when she had pumped him for as much information about as many surviving Jews as she figured he knew, then she would slip away and call the Gestapo, and they would come and pick him up and take him to a concentration camp along with all of his friends and kill them. And the next morning, she would dress herself up and she would go looking for another Jewish man to go live with. And that's what she did for the remaining 2 years of the war. Stella was good at what she did. By the end of the war, in the small, very small remaining Jewish community, there was a rumor about a greifer. They knew what a greifer was. It's someone that works for the Germans trying to catch Jews, kind of like undercover police, you would say. The Germans trusted Stella so much they even allowed her to carry a gun. Nazis allowing a Jewish girl to carry a gun. They didn't want anything to happen to Stella. She's too good. But the rumor that spread through the remaining Jewish community was, you have to watch out because there's a greifer who's very dangerous. She's evil. There are people in the world that are immoral. They have bad morals. This one is amoral. She has no morals whatsoever. She will do anything to find out who you are and who your friends are, where you're hiding, and where you get those counterfeit identity documents. They didn't know her name, didn't know who she was. They just knew there was a woman out there. They called her the Blonde Poison, and they called her the Beautiful Death. If she catches you, she's going to get you, and she's going to get all of your friends. 1945, Germany was defeated, and Stella tried to melt away. She had plenty of money. She had been very well paid during the war for the service that she rendered. But it was actually her greed that caught up with her. After the war, the German government started a program to compensate the surviving persecuted Jews. If you could prove that you were Jewish, you could sign up for a program that would give you cash payments. And that was too good for Stella. She had lots of money, but she wanted that money too. She signed up. She went to an office to register, and when she was standing in line, somebody was standing behind her in that line, and they started studying her and thinking, and they said, "That's the Blonde Poison. I think that's Beautiful Death standing in front of me." And they turned her in. She was investigated and put on trial. She went to prison for 10 years. And then she was released. Stella spent the rest of her money. A little bit about her trial. She was very indignant that she had been arrested. She insisted all throughout the trial that she was innocent. I didn't do anything wrong. She complained about being in jail. This is very uncomfortable here. She said, "I get no joy, no sky, no sun, no flowers, and they don't even play music for me in here. And the reason they're doing this to me, the reason people turn me in, it was jealousy. I am still too good looking for them. That's why they're doing that to me." Stella wasn't immoral. Stella was amoral. She had no morals whatsoever. Stella lived actually a long life. She lived, I think, to be about 85 years old. She lived quite well. She had money. She was never without a man. She went through 5 husbands and countless live-in boyfriends after the war. And then she ended her life, they believe, by committing suicide. Consider Erica's mother and Stella. Both of them were Jewish in World War II. Both of them lived in similar desperate circumstances. And in those desperate circumstances, each of them, Erica's mother and Stella Goldslag, had to make a decision. And that was a decision about self. Erica's mother made a decision about self. In very desperate circumstances, she was willing to throw away the last thing that was hers, her baby girl. She gave up the child in hopes that the child could live, rather than holding on to the child to the end. Stella made a choice about self as well, and she chose self. Stella chose self-preservation. She was determined that she was going to live, and she was going to live well. And if that meant sending you to your death, that was a good deal for Stella. She sent between 600 and 3,000 Jews to their deaths, her people, so that she could live, and she could live very well. Stella gave up everyone else to save herself. The question I have for you this evening is, where are you on the spectrum of self? Maybe at one end of that spectrum, I would say, is Erica's mother. I don't know what type of person she was. I'm not saying that she was a Christian person, but she was selfless. Had only one thing left, and that was a very valuable thing, her baby girl, and she gave it away for the sake of the girl. Stella Goldslag is at the far other end of that spectrum of self. She was a very selfish person. I like this quote. Self is the last enemy to be destroyed. It will make any concession if only it be allowed to live. Self will permit you to do anything, sacrifice anything, suffer anything, be anything, go anywhere, take any liberties, bear any crosses, anything, if only you will allow it to live, because self dies hard. Turn your Bibles to Matthew chapter 16. Matthew chapter 16. Go down to verse 24. Matthew chapter 16. Go down to verse 24. If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. What is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then shall reward every man according to his works. Self is the last enemy to be destroyed. You call me the way, but you walk me not. You call me the life, but live me not. You call me master, but obey me not. You call me the truth, but believe me not. You call me Lord, but serve me not. If I deny you at the judgment, blame me not. Self dies hard. If you actually are going to have a life, a good life, a life that's lived for God, if you're going to have a family of your own someday, a Christian family, then you're going to have to make a decision about self. You have to make a decision about all sorts of practical things, like what you will and won't allow in your life. And there may be some very convenient things, enjoyable things, that you will have to make decisions about, because it would be good for you, but it might not be good for your children. It might be like those branches just need to be trimmed back, cut, because it allows a path for the serpent into your life and into your home. And the serpent wants to eat the little birds. And if you're like Erica's mother, you'll do whatever it takes to preserve the little birds, to take care of them and to protect them. If you're like Stella, it'll be a little different than that. You'll have what you want in life, and what happens to other people? It's not a concern of yours if you're like Stella Goldslag. It's been said that self will destroy the work that God had wanted to do in your life. I think God does have a plan for every person. He has a good plan. It says, I know the thoughts I think toward you, and they're good thoughts. I have a good plan for you. But self will destroy the work that God had wanted to do in your life. He's only going to be able to do that work in your life if you're willing to get yourself out of the way. And either you will or you won't. Turn your Bibles to Jeremiah chapter 29. Jeremiah chapter 29. This is a passage I used the other night. Question for you. So here's your takeaway question for the evening. Have you ever given yourself up to God? Kind of given yourself away to God? That, yeah, I have things I would like for my life. I've kind of got my own dreams and goals. But I'm going to give it to God. And if he wants something different, that's what I want. Jeremiah chapter 29, go down to verse 11. For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. That in the English there it says an expected end. A better translation there would be a planned out ending. I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a planned out ending. Then shall ye call upon me, and ye shall go and pray unto me, and I will hearken unto you. And ye shall seek me and find me. When? Ye shall seek me and find me when ye shall search for me with all your heart, and I will be found of you. Call for a song, and someone can close.